Welcome back now. As the world reacts to the death of Pope Francis, we're looking back on his life, legacy as the head of the Catholic Church.
Join us now is Father Joe McDonald, parish priest at the parish of Selbridge and Straffan, Gina Menzies, theologian and member of We Are Church Ireland, and Brother Richard Hendrick, brother at Capuchin Franciscans at Church Street in Dublin. Good morning to you all. Thank you all so much for coming in to see us. Father Joe, what was Pope Francis's message to people like yourself?
I think to people like me who are essentially, I hope we're called to be pastors, I think he really gave almost a little bit of a kick or a shake-up that we had to be very, very strong on forgiveness. That, you know, I think he said that the Lord never tires of forgiving. So I think that was the big one, that we would be very clear there's nobody beyond, if you like, God's love would be. And I think also the whole thing of inclusion, you know, that I think for us, I hope we probably, in a way, didn't need to be told, but it's good that he did. I think he told us, mainly in his actions, no finger pointing, no tut-tutting. The welcome embrace of the Lord is
which could be seen as a huge difference from what the church once was. And that word inclusion, Gina, it's been used over and over again. You're a theologian, you're a part of We Are Church Ireland, which is advocating for progressive change. What was Pope Francis to you in relation to progression in a traditional church in a modern world?
Well, I think he has reset the church, is one way of describing it. I think he has taken on, if you like, the themes and the motifs of the Second Vatican Council, which probably most people of a younger generation have never even heard of the Second Vatican Council, never mind of the direction in which it was sending the church. And the previous two popes, Pope Benedict XVI and John Paul II, they actually really discarded Vatican II. It was dead and buried in the water. And I think people who come from, I suppose, my background of We Are Church Ireland, who believe sort of in inclusion, as Father Joe said, in participation. And, you know, the key themes of Vatican II was about the people of God. The people of God are the church. It isn't the hierarchy, it isn't the Pope, it isn't the cardinals, it is the whole lot of us. And I think Francis put a much bigger emphasis on the sacrament of baptism. So everybody who's baptised is included. And he also evoked the notion that there's a spirit, however we understand our God, but the spirit, if you like, speaks to everybody. It isn't an exclusive, it's inclusive. And therefore he was very strong on listening to what everybody had to say to reach different positions, and particularly to be non-judgmental. I mean, if you think, again, the comparison between the different papacies, under the two previous papacies, there were over 100 theologians and priests and a few women, because there were only a few women, who were silenced. You cannot speak, you cannot preach, you cannot question, you must follow the rule, the letter of the law, or otherwise you're out. Nobody under Francis was ever silenced. I just sort of have a bit in my heart that there were 6 Irish, 4 theologians and 2 priests who were silenced, and some of them were friends of mine, and I'm really sad that somehow that wasn't revoked before he died. But he certainly never judged anybody. Going back to, you know, that first encounter in the plane, I think everybody remembers that, when he was asked about gay and homosexuality, and he said, "Who am I to judge? If a person tries to live their life to the best of their insights, I will not judge." And I think that was a key motif of his whole papacy, that, you know, he would not judge people, he would not condemn people. And yet, I think there was a steeliness in his heart as well, particularly in relation to world conflict. And if you read the message of Easter Sunday, which of course I believe he put together, but he obviously couldn't speak it, he went through the whole world and the conflict everywhere, and it was a real petition for peace throughout the world.
Brother Richard, you're nodding your head alongside that. As a Franciscan monk, how important a figure was he to your community?
Well, he was a brother to us. I think that's the first thing. I mean, even though he was a Jesuit prior to his papacy, we would have seen him as a man with a Franciscan heart. He chose the name Francis in entering the papacy and was very clear. The day that he named himself Francis, we were all debating to see, was it St. Francis Xavier or St. Francis of Assisi, because Francis Xavier was a great Jesuit saint himself. But he was very clear it was Francis of Assisi, and the modality of his papacy was very much in that mode. It was a mode of brotherhood to all. It was a mode of openness, as we've heard from my colleagues here. It was a mode particularly of awareness of the great climate crisis that's ongoing, and he became an extraordinary voice for that, really deep mining the contemplative tradition of the Church right the way back to its earliest days in terms of its understanding of the earth as being not just something to be used, but as he called it, our common home, and to recognise the importance for that. And then, he came and visited with us in Dublin, in our Capuchin community there in Church Street, came to our day centre for the homeless, famously founded by Brother Kevin back in the 60s, and was just an extraordinary gift to us there. In fact, when he came, one of the lovely things that happened was that Brother Kevin had a beautiful chair made for the Pope. And when he came, he refused point blank to use it. He said, no, I'm sitting on the same chair as the rest of the homeless people, and sat with them at their level and spoke to them at their level, and continued to remind us to recognise in every person we encounter the presence of Christ.
And this symbolism that he had of being a person of the people, I don't think it was just symbolism, it was very much who he was. Because this next part gets fascinating. We've seen, everyone's seen Conclave at this stage, so we're into this, people thinking of this political intrigue. But the fact is that this was a man who, just a couple of days ago, met with the Vice President of America, J.D. Vance, and gave him, not judgmentally, I would say, but did talk about immigrants and talk about how important that experience was. He was the child of immigrants himself. All these things were very close to his heart, and he didn't seem to cow in front of powerful people and their politics beliefs, which might be in direct conflict to his, I don't think, Joe.
I think that's one of the big things about him is his courage, that he was courageous from the very beginning to state clearly the gospel value. And it really, I think your phrase is particularly good, Morning, that he didn't cow to anybody. He was in nobody's pocket in that sense. And I think that also for us, I think, is a challenge for all of us, even in a local situation. Do we preach it fearlessly and without, looking for favour or trying to keep in with certain groups and so on? But that's his example. It's one of courageous proclaiming the gospel. And I also think that I think Gina mentioned the Spirit, to me, he was steeped in the Spirit, that the movement of the Holy Spirit. It's all this talk at the moment about who will replace him and so on. And you mentioned the movie Conclave and so on. And I think we might have our ideas. I would have particular ideas of the type of Pope I'd like and all that sort of stuff. The reality is none of us will choose it. It will actually be God's choice. And that's actually part of our faith. People say, and you mentioned, the sort of the what goes on in a conclave and the intrigue, and this group want that and the other group want that. But the Holy Spirit's more powerful than that. Our belief is that even within, for example, the possible micropolitics of it, it's God's will. God will choose the successor of Francis. That would be, and I'm excited about that as well.
Yeah, that's good.
What happens next, Gina?
Well, the funeral will take place within 4 to 6 days. I think it's going to be announced today. It'll probably be Friday or Saturday. And then there will be 9 days of official mourning. But I think already, as Father Joe has said, there's probably being... The Jesuits actually have a wonderful phrase for when they're picking a new leader. I just think it's brilliant. They call it the murmuratio. And just that means, they're murmuring. So people will be talking everywhere, as we are and as everybody
a great
is.
phrase, isn't it?
I just think it's brilliant that the Jesuits do it like that. And they say, what do you think? Would that be the best? Whatever, So that's already, taking place. So I think it's 15 to 20 days, the conclave, will take place. And of course, those outside the church, as much as those inside the church, are completely intrigued by it. And it is fascinating that movie, Conclave, I'd already read the book, and that movie kind of reflected on Ralph Fiennes.
Gina, we're just seeing here, these are just the pictures now of the Holy Father, Pope Francis, being laid out in the Vatican. They're just coming to us live right now. And we know, again, he wanted this to be very simple.
Absolutely.
Everything about how he was in life because he doesn't want to be on this big altar.
No, he doesn't.
He just wants to be laid out.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to be in 3 coffins, and he wants to go. In fact, I was in Rome recently at the rugby match, and I went to that church, the Maria Maggiore, where he wants to be buried, outside Rome. Outside the Vatican.
Yes.
And that to him was very important, that, you know, he did not want to be just identified with the Vatican. He was for everybody, and he wanted to go to what was a very important church to him.
It is. Richard, this is the end of an era, and an era that I know the world is in a very precarious place, and we see really terrible things every single day. He did seem to want to try to make a change and to embrace people. Do you hope that his legacy will continue? I'm assuming.
Well,
yes.
Indeed, and I'm sure it will. I mean, as Father Joe has said, you know, we receive the Pope we need, and I think that's what we can be hopeful for. That's what we can be confident of. Pope Benedict himself, famously commenting on previous conclaves ever before he was Pope, he said, you know, the Pope is elected either with us or despite us. And I think that's the way we see that the Spirit moves with human beings, through human beings, around human beings. But the Pope will be elected, and we'll receive the Pope that we need. And from that point of view, I think it's important to recognise the needs of the world that we have at the moment. One of the most touching gifts, I think, of the last little part of his life was his daily communication with the parish priest in Gaza. You know, even from his sickbed, checking in just even to make sure, did they have enough to eat? You know, what did they have for dinner that evening? Did they manage, the famous piece of film is, did they manage to have the leftovers? You know, he was paternal as well as being the Pope. And I think to see that genuine concern for people at a very immediate level is a gift that hopefully whoever holds the keys going forward, I really hope that will be an element of their papacy as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it is fascinating. You would hope that legacy will continue, but as you say, it is in God's hands now. Brother Richard Hendrick, thank you so much for coming in. Gina Menzies and Father Joe McDonald, thank you all.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right now, it's time to go over to